and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be unpacking the poem Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. So firstly, as always, we start by assessing our poet so that we can better understand the context and the framework before diving into this poem. Dylan Thomas lived between 1914 and 1953. He was a famous Welsh poet and writer, and he's known for his word usage and vivid imagery. His genre of writing is really quite interesting because he's known as a modernist poet, yet he has influences of other movements as well. Such as in this poem, we can see some elements of the 19th century romantic movement and how he talks about nature in this poem. So he's influenced by all these different genres, so it's difficult to define exactly in which particular genre his poetry can be placed. Let's get into discussing the title now. So Fern Hill is actually a place, or the name of a farm, which Dylan Thomas's relative owned and where he spent a lot of time in his childhood. So it's a place in Wales where he grew up, but the title Fern Hill can also just signify the setting, and this setting is going to prompt the reflection that takes place throughout the poem. It's almost like a diary entry. You put sort of where you are, and then you're talking about the reflections that happen while you're there. So as the speaker thinks about Fern Hill and thinks back to Fern Hill, then these are all the thoughts that come into his head, which is going to be the rest of the poem. So the title is incredibly personal because it's about his personal childhood, but I think that you'll agree with me at the end of this poem that the themes and the ideas are really quite universal. Now, as I was young and easy under the apple boughs, about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb. Golden in the heydays of his eyes, and honoured among wagons, I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. So if we have a look at our first stanza, our first line, we start with now, which already indicates to us that this is going to be a reflective and sincere poem. The I shows us this first person perspective. This is a personal poem. I was young and easy. This means that life was easy, it was carefree, it was relaxed. So this speaker is reflecting on his childhood, on when he was running around the farm Fern Hill and what he was experiencing. So he is an adult now and he's looking back and reflecting on the past. And he says that when you are young, life is young and easy, it's carefree, it's relaxed. Under the apple boughs means branches. So in nature. About the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green. You can notice the conversational tone already, the now, the I, the enjambment. The enjambment here, enjambment is run on lines. Do you see boughs doesn't end on a full stop, it continues on to the next line. And this is really indicative of the sincerity of reflection, of authenticity. It's almost these unfiltered thoughts that he is having. The lilting house, lilting is sort of melodic and buoyant. It has this connotation of like buoyancy. And the alliteration house and happy adds to the sense of breathlessness. And so it's almost like these really happy days, and we can see from the lilting and the alliteration, it's just breathless happiness. As the grass was green, this is a simile, and this really is comparing, it's a sense of certainty. So it's comparing his happiness to the certainty of the grass being green. And so he's saying that during his childhood he experienced this certainty of joy. It was so vivid in his life. It was as natural as the grass being green. The natural imagery here is going to continue later on, and whenever we have natural imagery, I like to think, or the way it typically comes across to me in poetry, is it's this idea of all is right in the world idea, because nature is something righteous, is something where it should be, especially when it's being described so beautifully like this. If you think about green, green is also a symbol for optimism, youth, for harmony, but also for inexperience and naivety. And we're going to see this color being repeated all the time throughout this poem to emphasize how during this period of the speaker's life, when he was a child, he was incredibly green, in the sense he was optimistic, he was youthful, he was in harmony with nature, but he was also inexperienced and naive about the world. The night above, the dingle's starry. So the night above, he's talking about when night falls. In the dingle, dingle is a forested valley, starry, filled with stars. Time, let me hail and climb. Now we're going to get to a really key theme in this poem, which is time. Time is being personified here, and if we think about time in terms of when we're a child versus when we're an adult, in childhood, time is extremely forgiving. We think that we have a lot of time when we're young. Even if you think of little kids, they don't really have an understanding of time moving forward, or time having sort of this finite nature to it, in the sense that you can tell a kid, oh, there's 5 minutes left, and they have no idea what really 5 minutes means. To them, they've just got the whole day ahead of them and their whole lives ahead of them. Time, he addresses time, or he uses time as a sense of personification, because he gives time the power to let him do things. So it's giving time a human quality, and therefore he's giving time power. And so in his childhood, time let me hail and climb. Hail meaning like praise, and climb, if you think about climb, it's a physical activity akin to, or similar to, or hinting at a child's energy, right? They're always climbing things. But also, if you think figuratively what climb could signify, it could mean always desiring more. And when we're a kid, we have these big dreams. We're always desiring more and more things. We're climbing. Golden, in the heydays of his eyes. Golden, gold is another color that's going to be repeated throughout this poem. Gold is enriching, it's beautiful. And so he's talking about his days as a child being enriching and beautiful days. In the heydays, if we think about the meaning of heydays, it is a period of a person's greatest success or activity. So in your heyday, meaning when you were most successful, when you were most active. And I think it's interesting, he's talking about golden in the heyday, so he's talking about his childhood as being sort of his heyday, but he's only recognizing it as his heyday in reflection, in retrospect. Of his eyes. Eyes are the window to the soul. You can see someone's excitement and joy through their eyes. This his could refer to time itself, that time has sort of looked down on him and has given him all of this in his childhood. But you can also think of it like gold in the heyday of his eyes. It's almost like someone separate from him. He's this completely different person when he was a child to who he is now. And honoured among wagons, I was prince of the apple towns. Honoured, here we're going to have some fairy tale imagery of wagons and princesses. If you think about wagons, they signify sort of commoners in fairy tales. And then the prince, obviously he says, I was prince. This is a metaphor, this is a comparison. He's not really a prince, but he is comparing himself to a prince of the apple towns. This is a fictional place, obviously, and obviously, like a child, what he sees around him, that's what he's going to name his town. So he sees all the apple branches from the first stanza, and so he names it Apple Town. So lots of apples, he's in an orchard, and he's the prince of this town, in inverted commas. And once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves. And now he talks about being this prince of who his subjects are. They are the trees and the leaves, and he lordly goes about his business and controlling them. And I think the image of a prince is so significant because firstly, when you just think of children use their imagination a lot. So they would play pretend, and they would create characters and be, this is the king, this is the queen, this is the prince. But also, if you think about a prince is someone who we think of is being in control of something, having power, having purpose, having a place in the world. And when we're a child, we often have that sense of comfort. We feel like a sort of prince. We feel like we're in control and we have power. And later on, as we mature, we realize how naive we were, because as an adult, we realize we're actually not immune to a whole bunch of different things about life, a bunch of different realities that we don't recognize when we're a child, when we're naive, and we think we can control things. Notice the enjambment here again, and this lack of punctuation. It's almost all these images merging together. You sort of see one thing and think of another, and it's almost reflective lens of, of how children think, how they this and that and the next thing. And it's almost also like he's thinking about these ideas, and as he thinks of one idea, another one comes crashing back to him. So his thoughts and ideas are flowing, as we can see through this enjambment and this lack of punctuation. Trail with daisies and barley. So trail meaning like hanging down. There's this abundance of plants that's hanging on these trees and these leaves, and there's daisies and barley. There's beautiful abundance of nature. It's almost like he has this kingdom, and it's filled with nature as his subjects. Down the rivers of the windfall light. So down the rivers, think of the connotation of a river, of water. It's of a life, of fullness. Windfall, or light, really has positive connotations. Windfall is like when a fruit is blown off a tree in the wind. So it's almost like this natural occurrence once again. And so we really get this understanding of this abundance, the sense of the abundant spirit in his childhood. And just this entire stanza just points to this sense of natural imagery, of beauty in the world, and how a child would see the world. In this poem, we can see how nature mirrors or reflects his joy. His emotion is caught up in the imagery of nature. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns, about the happy yard and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young only once, time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means, and green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman. The calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. We notice a lot of repetition in this poem, which really adds to this conversational tone. It's almost like he's speaking freely, and when we speak freely, we tend to repeat. And it's also used to emphasize the themes and the message that he's trying to relay with these repeated words. And as I was green and carefree, green once again, young, innocent, naive, inexperienced, famous among the barns. He's well known or loved in his home. He's sort of in his element. He is the prince. He is famous in his little kingdom that he's created. About the happy yard. This is an example of a transferred epithet where the adjective being used here, happy, to describe yard, is not really describing the yard, but it's actually describing the speaker being happy and how the yard is therefore this happy place. And singing as the farm was home. The farm to him, Fern Hill, is the sanctuary. He felt safe and comfortable. This was his home. In the sun that is young, once only. So we are only young once. We may not realize it at the time, but we are only young once. Time, let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means. So time to a child stretches on forever. Once again, time being personified here, being given power. The enjambment in these two lines shows time continuing on. Golden is almost a really majestic color. It's the majesty of childhood. And golden as well can refer to he's reveling in the sun's golden rays, which represents all the time he has to play. Because when you're a kid, it's all about whether the sun is up or whether, the moon is up. When the sun is out, then you're free to play and have a great time. And that's what he's talking about here. He's reveling in the sun's rays. In the mercy of his means, that alliteration of the M sound is really long, it sort of draws it out. That's the effect, or that's what time is to a child, it really can be drawn out. And green and golden, once again, those repeated colors, green and experience, gold and preciousness. I was huntsman and herdsman. So going back to the first stanza where he was a prince, now he plays all these different roles like children do by playing pretend. But notice how these roles, a huntsman and a herdman, are natural and earthly endeavors. So it shows how much the Fern Hill environment has affected and influenced his upbringing, which we can consider as a key theme in this poem. The calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold. So the calves singing, that's the sort of shepherd and herdsman. The foxes on the hills barked, that's the hunting side. And clear and cold, that alliteration is effective because it's a really harsh alliteration, so it emphasizes this sort of harshness of hunting and foxes. And the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. So now we're going to get this reference to the Bible, and even earlier as well. If we speak about huntsmen and herdsmen, there's a connection to nature and even Bible stories about shepherds and hunters. And then we have the mention of the Sabbath, obviously, and the Sabbath is this holy day of rest. And so this can refer to this idea of childhood being a really holy time. But it could also refer to, now it's time to rest. It's the end of the day. It's the end of the day of play. Notice the rang. So we have this image of a church bell ringing, and it's auditory. So it's, all these different senses. Whenever a speaker or a poem uses different senses, it really just makes the poem all the more meaningful and understandable to the reader. So it's the church bells ring that make him recognize the approach of the Sabbath. In the pebbles of the holy stream. I think the preposition in is significant here because it's nature is sort of embedded within, or holiness is embedded within nature. So it's in the pebbles. This holiness is in the pebbles of the holy stream. And nature is holy and worth revering. In the last line of the first stanza, we spoke about a river. Now we have another water image of the stream. But I also want to consider how religion, this reference to religion sort of makes you think of the role of religion. And religion is, in a sense, a way to guide people and show people the way. It's something that is that people honor. And I think we can refer to, because of all the natural imagery here, we can see how to the speaker, nature was his guidance. Nature was his form of faith or religion that guided him and showed him sort of the pathway through his childhood. All the sun long it was running. It was lovely, the hay, fields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys. It was air and plain, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, the nightjars flying with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. So all the sun long it was running. It's, as a child, the whole day to him is wide open for play, and it's all about being, in the middle of the farm. You don't have a watch, you don't have a clock. It's something, that you watch the sun, and then you know whether it's daytime or nighttime. The sun determines the day just as it determined the day of early humans. It was lovely. He's being reflective here, thinking back. The hay fields high as the house. This is alliteration and it's a simile. The enjambment shows the continuation, the continued flow of memory. The fields high as the house. It could also, you can think of it as a bit as hyperbole as well. Maybe a little bit of an over-exaggeration. The tunes from the chimneys, there's lots of references to song, which is interesting because something that you think about maybe when you think of nature, or at least I think of nature as being sort of quiet and silent as opposed to, the city where it's always busy and loud and industrial sounds. But actually nature is filled with song and joyous rhythms of the birds, and just in general nature is actually very song-like. It was air and playing lovely and watery. So it's, just to go back to chimneys actually. So the reference to house and chimney shows it's not just all nature, but this farmhouse too has a positive meaning to it, has a positive connotation to the speaker. So the air, he was playing lovely, watery, just all these beautiful words and beautiful diction to describe and to reflect and reiterate and reinforce how wonderful this period of his life was and how the daytime was. And fire green as grass. This simile once again emphasizing how he's playing and enjoying life in all weather and all circumstances. Everything always looked green to him as a child. It always looked optimistic to him. And nightly under the simple stars, that alliteration, that imagery. As I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. So now talking about the end of the day coming, the moon is now out, they're the simple stars. The sun has, left. It's no longer daytime. There's no time for play now. But even as he's sleeping, the images of the farm come to him. As I rode, I like this diction of rode, because even going to sleep as a child is like an adventure. I rode to sleep. The owls remember his subjects who undertake his bidding, him as the prince or as this famous person, as he says earlier, were bearing the farm away. It's almost like the farm moves with him into his dreams. So as a child, I think we can all think back and, even when we notice children today, they seem to think that the world revolves around them. So it's almost like the farm exists only for him. And so as he sleeps, the farm is taken into his dreams by the owls for him. Everything is just being done for him. That's his entire world. All the moon long I heard. So think back to the first line of the stanza. The sun determines the day, the moon determines the night. So as long as the moon is up, as long as he's sleeping, as long as it's nighttime. Blessed among the stables the nightjars. He hears a nightjar is a nocturnal bird with a distinctive call. Flying with the ricks. Ricks is a stack of hay, and the horses flashing to the dark. And then it becomes dark. So as this could mean like as sleep overtakes him, or we can refer to now we're moving to the next stanza where he's going to reflect on this idea sort of flashing in the dark of his childhood, because now he's going to awaken and realize his childhood innocence has gone. And then to awake, and the farm like a wanderer white, with the dew come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all shining, it was Adam and maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light in the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the whinnying green stable onto the fields of praise. So, and then to awake, this awakening is figurative. He's no longer a child, he's now an adult. And the farm, like a wanderer whale, with the dew come back. So he's saying that the farm has sort of come back to him. This image of the farm is really powerful. It's his whole childhood is wrapped up in this image, in this place. Like a wanderer white, this is alliteration of this W sound. It really emphasizes a sense of wondrous intrigue. It's almost like he's awakening from a reality and now exploring the new reality. With the dew is the moisture that you find on the ground early in the morning. So this signifies a new chapter, because now he's talking about awakening to this new day. So it's almost like he's awakening, he's sort of now an adult and looking back. So again, he's sort of awakening this idea of his past, but it can also be like a child. Every single day is such a brand new, amazing, exciting opportunity. And so he is seeing, like with the dew, this is a new chapter, a new day, a new sense of excitement. The rooster crows. It was all shining. The whole farm and his childhood is shining. Think of the connotations of shining. It's glittering, it's marvelous. Yet, if something's shiny, it's probably unattainable and unrealistic in adulthood. In adulthood, you perhaps know too much for something to be incredibly shiny. It was Adam and maiden. This is a metaphor. Obviously, the farm is not Adam and Eve, but it's a metaphor and it's an allusion, Allusion, meaning a reference to the Garden of Eden. He is comparing the farm to the Garden of Eden, which shows how idyllic and wondrous this farm and his childhood was. The sky gathered again. It's a new day. There's a sense of reset. The sun comes up. And the sun grew round that very day. Round meaning full, that very day. It's this important day. And we're going to see what this important day is. It's this first day of life. It's the creation of the earth. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light. Notice simple being repeated from earlier. The sense of when you're in childhood, life is simple. So after the birth of simple light, it's after daybreak. He's reflecting here about the first day of sort of life, and it's like when you're a child, you just have all these new opportunities, new ideas, new excitement for every single day. In the first spinning place, in the first place, meaning the Garden of Eden, spinning place, if we think of the globe, if we think of Earth, the spellbound horses walking warm. Spellbound is like fairy tale connotations. Walking warm, that alliteration mimics the movement. Out of the whinnying green stable. Green stable, green, once again saying the sense of newness. We see another transferred epithet here. Because the horses are actually making this whinnying sound, which is also onomatopoeia, not actually the stable. Onto the fields of praise. Praising, there's a sense of praising the creator. And it links back to the previous stanza, this idea that nature must almost be worshipped, adored, and revered. And honoured among foxes and pheasants by the gay house, under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long. In the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways, my wishes raced through the house high hay, and nothing I cared, at my sky-blue trades that time allows, in all his tuneful turning, so few and such morning songs, before the children, green and golden, follow him out of grace. And so, an honoured among foxes and pheasants are birds, by the gay house, gay meaning happy, another transferred epithet. The house is not happy, but it's made happy by his experience of him being happy. So the transferred epithet really, it just emphasizes this joyous recollection, that it's so joyous that his what he thinks of when he thinks of this house, that the joy has transferred to the house, it's transferred to the things itself. So it really just emphasizes the joy and the happiness and the satisfaction he felt as a child. Under the new made clouds, so it's almost like the new made clouds, like the world has been created just for him. Happy as the heart was long, here we have a simile, and it's just emphasizing how life is really long when you're a child. It's our perspective as a child. We see life as being long and endless. In the sun born over and over, it's the sense it's a new day every day. There are endless days, endless opportunities. I ran my heedless ways, heedless meaning reckless and careless. He was no sort of worry or concern or responsibility when he was a child. He just had day after day to run carefree. My wishes raced through the house high hay. It's almost like an image of paradise that he keeps talking about when he's a child. I mean, he's literally actually used the allusion of the Garden of Eden, which is the very definition of paradise. So all his wishes are fulfilled. If you think of the word race, like children are always racing, they're always striving, they're always running somewhere. House high hay, this is alliteration, but it's also hyperbolic. And it's also, this idea of wishes could also refer to like how adults maybe don't act on their wishes, they're more conservative, whereas children act on their wishes. If they desire something, they sort of go about racing to make it happen. And nothing I cared. So he was carefree, he cared about nothing. The sentence structure is interesting here. He doesn't say I cared about nothing, he says and nothing I cared, because it emphasizes the nothing. So it emphasizes how he truly didn't care about anything. He didn't have any concerns or worries when he was a child. He has a sense of freedom from worry, from responsibility, which is, that responsibility and that worry associated with adulthood. He is free from that. At my sky blue trade. So sky blue trade, a trade is like an activity, and sky blue sort of referring to the sun, well, the sun being out in the beautiful sky. It's like the activity that he did during the day, because we'd already discussed the sort of difference between the day and the night to a child. That time allows, in all his tuneful toning, so few and such morning songs. So that time allows, once again, is this idea of time permitting him to have this childhood, to have these memories. In his tuneful turning, that alliteration of the T sound sort of imitates a ticking sound of a clock. So few. So now in hindsight, as he reflects, in his childhood, it seemed like it was endless, but actually, time is sort of finite. As an adult, we realize that our time is going to end. We have few of these memories, we have few of these magical times. And such morning songs, once again, tuneful songs, all of this reference to sound. Before the children, green and golden, before the children who we know are green and golden, meaning innocent and inexperienced and sheltered, follow him out of grace, meaning that they mature. They fall out with this version of time. They're no longer carefree, innocent, or recognize the scarcity of time. Or they're no longer carefree and innocent, and now they start to recognize the scarcity of time. And they realize the abandonment of their childhood indulgences, and they have to sort of be mature and sort of grow out of that. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days that time would take me up to the swallow's thronged loft by the shadow of my hand, in the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep. I should hear him fly with the high fields, and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. So notice throughout this poem it keeps switching between the present tense and the past tense, showing the reflection on these sort of past memories and ideas. So this line, nothing I cared, is repeated for emphasis, and it also just emphasizes the sense of nostalgia and a longing for the past. In the lamb-white days, lamb and white, both symbolic of purity and innocence. What time would take me? So when once again, time being personified, having this power, it's almost like we live our life based on time's schedule and time's whims. We don't really have a choice. Time tells us, okay, you're a child, you have time, or you're an adult, you sort of don't have time. And here time takes him up to the swallow-thronged loft, so to like the top of the tree that's densely packed with these swallows, with these birds, by the shadow of my hand. The idea of shadow can be symbolic here of like, or representative of, shadow is something that is attached to you but is not really you. So his reality as a child is now a shadow to him, because it once was a part of him but it's no longer anymore. It's reflection, it's detached, it's not his adult self. Notice the enjambment here. It's a sense of a journey, of time is taking him up to this magical place above the trees where he can interact with nature. In the moon that is always rising. So the appearance of the moon shows that now he must sleep and inevitably awaken to find himself an adult. The use of always really just signifies how time always continues. It always keeps moving. The moon is always rising. Time is ending. So as the moon rises, in this case, it's almost this idea of he is going to have to go to sleep now for this final time in his childhood and awaken to actually becoming a mature adult and leaving this behind. Nor that riding to sleep, I should hear him fly in the high fields, and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. So as he goes to sleep, time comes in, and beforehand, where it was the owls carried the farm with him while he slept, now time is going to come and sort of pluck out this memory or this lifestyle from him. And so this version of the farm is taken away by time. His childhood and his innocence can never be regained. The farm forever fled, that alliteration just emphasizing the sense of this image and this whole ideal has escaped, been separated from him. It's now a childless land. The farm is now just a farm, as it always was in a literal sense. It's devoid of childhood wonder, now that the narrator has grown up. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means. So oh is an exclamation or an interjection, really making this conversational, really making it sincere and authentic. As I was young, so young and easy, hint, or think back to that first line, when I was young and relaxed in the mercy of his means. That alliteration draws out, once again, that drawing out of the M sound, how time was long when he was a child. Time held me green and dying. So time, we are all subjects of time almost. So time rules us. And here we have this melancholic tone. as he reflects on ultimately his childhood dying and his childhood innocence and inexperience washing away. Time held me. Held is really powerful, so he has this control over him. Green and dying. So green meaning this inexperience and this innocence, and it's dying. His childhood innocence is going away. He still perhaps feels naive and inexperienced, but now the environment has shifted. It's no longer perhaps a positive thing to be green or to be inexperienced, to be innocent anymore. He's had to change. Though I sang in my chains like the sea. So though indicates, it's but is melancholic, he still wants to recapture all this beautiful sort of memory of his childhood. So he's not happy to sort of see it go. I sang, the reference to singing once again. This poem is really quite song-like in its structure. And the poem is the link to the childhood innocence. So if you think of like a song, how it takes you back to something, when you hear a song, you think of an experience, or you think of a time in your life. And so he's singing, he's trying to sort of recapture that moment, trying to recapture his childhood. Singing also signifies hope. He hopes that these memories and this song that he's created is going to sustain him in terms of its legacy in his life. It's going to keep him going and keep him sort of faithful to his ideals and excited about life. In my chains like the sea. So chains obviously symbolic of restriction. Like the sea, that's simile. If we think of the sea as being vast, endless, deep, it's almost like he's saying the chains of adulthood, of responsibility, of growing up, sort of keep you captured in this endless, deep pit. And he sings, he tries to remember these ideas of his childhood, tries to recapture those memories in a way to keep going through the pain, through the chains. So in terms of a general analysis, the structure of this poem, six stanzas, 9 lines each. There is a sort of patterning of the syllables used in every line, and this adds to this song-like quality, this lyrical quality to this poem. So we can describe this poem as being lyrical. There's a sprinkling of rhyme throughout. It's not, a typical rhyme scheme, but the sprinkling of rhyme is almost like a magical chant or spell, and it adds to this harmonious mood. There's lots of enjambment, lots of indentation, which really emphasizes the sincerity of the poem and the authenticity behind it. As I said earlier, it's almost like this unfiltered reflection. The tone of the poem can be described as reflective, contemplative, impassioned, fervent, authentic, ardent, and in the last few lines you can even say melancholic. The mood is of nostalgia and perhaps wonder. The theme and the message about time and the power of time, childhood versus adulthood and all the connotations attached to that we've discussed, nature and its wonders, innocence versus experience, naivety versus responsibility, and those themes and messages sort of giving you like sort of subtitles, and we've discussed all the different elements of those ideas as we've analyzed the poem. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video helpful. Please make sure to like and subscribe, like the video and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll be back soon with some questions on some of your poems to help you prepare for final exams.